Hello, friends. This is Beatlesfanize, G.M. Danielson's #1 fan, or as some of you may know me as, Trenfield, the servant of Master Danielson. As many of you know, the Master has gone away in search of a new hunting ground. But I'm here to let all of you know that I will keep tending the grounds at Castle Danielstein. And I will keep the castle clean, and the grounds maintained to honor our master. I'm sure many of you feel the same way I do. Very sad that GM has moved on. But we must also be happy for him in finding a new adventure that he loves. Well, I'll give you a little history. I've always been a fan of the old-time radio shows. Some of you remember ones like Lights Out, The Shadow, Radio Mystery Theater, and many more. One of my first records my grandparents gave me was the radio broadcast of the 1938 War of the Worlds. From then on, I was hooked. I just loved radio. Well, unlike movies or TV that's showing you images, radio plays, dramas, they only have sound, vocals, effects, and music. So your mind has to create the images. You are only focused on the story and not distracted by images. For many years, I tried to find audio records or story records, The Shadow, like I had mentioned before. And then when YouTube came along, I started looking up audiobooks and radio plays. Well, one day in late 2014, I found this show called Horror Readings by G.M. Danielson. Like, wow, what's this? And from the first few words in the opening, I was completely in love and hooked by this vampire. Well, then in 2016, I found a site on YouTube called the Simply Scary Podcast, hosted by G.M. Danielson. I was so thrilled. During that time, I had the chance to start talking to GM. And over time, we became very good friends, and soon I became his servant, Trenfield. Well, then in 2017, GM came up with this great idea. We had a party, a fictional party at my home. Well, many of you may recall GM Danielson's After Midnight Halloween Party. And that was just totally awesome, great. I'm sure many of you remember. Well, it was really wonderful until Horthbegoth, GM's little dragon, burned down my house at the end. Well, over the years, GM has thrilled us with his spine-tingling tales of horror. He has brought us all to the brink of madness on many cold nights. And each year for Halloween, GM was so kind to record audio for my Halloween sets, and many, many people loved hearing him. Well, one day, I was extremely honored when GM offered to do a collaboration with me. You just cannot know how thrilled I was. So, I will be sharing here again The African Bowana Spider by Vincent Vena Cava, narrated by Beatlesfanize and G.M. Danielson. We will miss you, Master Danielson. Long days and pleasant nights. Cheers, everyone. The African Bowana Spider by Vincent Vena Cava, narrated by Beatlesfanize and G.M. Danielson.
Dr. Tweed, so nice to finally see you again. I trust you have many stories to tell me about your adventures in the deep heart of Africa.
Dr. Tweed beamed with sheer delight as he greeted his colleague at the door. A red bow tie attached to the top of his khaki blazer gave the fellow an eccentric yet scholarly appearance. The old man squinted through his bifocals while beckoning Robert to the table, where 2 cups of tea had already been poured. "Robert, my good man. Yes, yes. Of course. Join me for some tea, and I shall regale you with a tale regarding the most curious creature this old man has ever had the pleasure of coming across in all his years of gallivanting around the globe." A friendly exchange of smiles and a handshake, and the 2 men sat at the table.
So, Doctor, tell me about this mysterious creature of yours.
Dr. Tweed's eyes lit up like a pair of bright blue sapphires. "Ah, yes, the African Bowana spider, named after the indigenous people who reside in the section of the jungle where the creature originally hails. It's a massive arachnoid, about 1/2 meter in diameter, but that's not even the most interesting tidbit about it."
I beg your pardon, Doctor, but I'm finding it quite hard to swallow that your interest in the tremendous girth of this spider would be eclipsed by an even more fascinating factoid.
The old man's lips curled into the slightest smirk upon hearing Robert's retort. "Oh, but eclipses it is, my dear friend. Perhaps you'll understand once you hear this remarkable anecdote. On my 21st night of exploring the Dark Continent, we found that one of our pack mules had begun to demonstrate bizarre and erratic behavior. The beast had started to crow and moan as though it was suffering from some sort of horrible illness. Our guides had previously warned my party that the primeval forest we made camp in was rife with poisonous asps, adders, mambas, among other deadly serpents. So naturally, I hypothesized, it had fallen victim to the bite of one of the jungle's venomous vipers. However, upon further examination, I could find no evidence of teeth marks on the animal. No wounds, no pricks, not a single thing that would indicate it had been attacked.
Sounds like quite the conundrum, Doctor.
Indeed it was. Even more curious was the fact that though I found the animal's behavior to be somewhat unnerving, many of our party's guides appear to be downright terrified. At the sight of the mule's predicament, a few of them even ran off our campsite into the darkness of the untamed jungle by themselves. The fools. I loaded my rifle in order to put the creature out of its misery, as it was now writhing on the ground and seemed to be suffering quite considerably. But before I had the chance to pull the trigger, my eyes witnessed a truly incredible sight.
No, Doctor, you aren't about to say...
Oh, but I am. Out of the animal's mouth crawled the Bowana spider. Dr. Tweed took a sip of tea, and Robert could tell by the man's reaction that it was still a bit too hot to drink. Like I said before, it was colossal. Now, I haven't quite figured out how the giant thing was able to contort its body enough to crawl its way into the beast's jaws. I do have a theory about what it was doing there in the first place. Dr. Tweed paused for a moment for dramatic effect, reveling in the mystery of his account.
Well, out with it then. I must say, good doctor, that I'm absolutely enthralled by this story of yours. You must tell me what happened next.
As it turns out, this particular species of arachnid has become quite feared by the natives, hence the reason why some of my party's guides had decided to take their chances out amongst the ferocious wildlife and poisonous flora of the jungle, instead of staying in the camp once they realized what was behind all of the ruckus. The remaining guides insisted that I shoot the spider, but you know me, Robert. I am a man of science, and what kind of accommodation would I be if I ended the life of such a spectacular specimen? This creature must be studied alive.
But doctor, you still haven't explained what it was doing inside the mule's mouth.
Have patience, my good man. All will be revealed in time. You see, the natives believe the spider to be some sort of soul-sucking demon, one that feasts upon the very life force of a man, bleeding him dry until he becomes nothing but a useless, withered husk. Obviously, any educated bloke like myself would dismiss such silly notions as nothing but foolish superstitions. But I do believe these primitive myths were onto something. Nevertheless, there is always a scientific explanation for these things. From my brief encounter with the creature, I have gathered that the eight-legged Goliath has evolved the most extraordinary of survival tactics. It appears that the spider entered our pack mule through its oral cavity. From there it may have some way attached itself to the beast's nervous system, granting it full access to the mule's movements and vocal patterns, essentially rendering the animal a useless puppet. What I'm saying, Robert, is that this creature was wearing our unfortunate mule like a hat on Sunday, and all of us were none the wiser. I have since postulated that the arachnid made itself at home in the body of our hooved host, feeding off of its spinal fluid, just long enough for it to plant a revolting sack of eggs.
What an intriguing yet horrifying creature, Doctor. Perhaps the guides who fled into the night weren't as foolish as you say. Could you imagine what would happen if a thing like that was on the loose here in England? People would be in quite a panic.
He and the old man shared a chuckle. The doctor took another sip of his tea. Could I imagine, Robert? Dare I say, it already is. Dr. Tweed's head suddenly cocked back in a violent manner. Terrible gagging noises emanated from his throat as blood began trickling from his eyes, ears, and nose. 8 10-inch long spidery legs emerged from his mouth. God, Doctor,